They say past is prologue, and that is certainly true in the outdoors. Today on Northland Outdoors, we pay homage to our treasured outdoor history and see firsthand how the past has affected the present and set the stage for a bright future in our Northland Outdoors. Here in the Northland, we fiercely embrace our outdoor heritage and traditions. The lives and lessons of those who came before us continue to guide us today. Hi everybody, I'm Brett Amundson. Welcome to Northland Outdoors. Here in Minnesota, there is no more important outdoors tradition or one with a more colorful history than our love of fishing. And much of that history is on display here at the Minnesota Fishing Museum in Little Falls. Today, we're going to take a closer look at this monument to Minnesota fishing. And we're going to spend some time in a place that has not only embraced its hardworking history, but has turned what the past left behind into one of the most beautiful regions in the state. But first, we're going to look to the skies in a piece of western Minnesota that is steeped in waterfowl hunting history and tradition. Along the Minnesota River in western Minnesota is an often overlooked sparkling gem known as Lac qui Parle. An oasis of wildlife in an ocean of farmland, Lac qui Parle is as fertile and alive as any of the fields that surround it, which is exactly how and why it got its name.
Lac qui Parle Lake, it's French for the lake that speaks. It's really a cool lake. No cabins, there's one cabin on it, but no cabins on the lake. It's wildlife central.
Chuck Ellingson is the owner of the Watson Hunting Camp, a full-service hunting and fishing facility that specializes in the legendary Canada goose hunting the lake that speaks is famous for.
Years ago, I'd say early 50s, the geese, the DNR clipped like 250 or 300 geese, their wings. And so they couldn't fly, so they just swam around the island out there. Well, pretty soon, it attracted more and more geese here. So then it turned into a refuge for geese, you know? And eventually, we're talking 150 to 200,000 geese here over the years. And basically, Lac qui Parle was the only place in the state that you could come and go goose hunting. Things have changed now, but we still get 80 to 100,000 birds that come and stage here. It's real good huntable numbers.
$80,000 to 100,000 geese. More than enough to get any waterfowler's heart beating faster. And it's why we're here. To take part in and enjoy the goose hunting legacy left by those that came before us. We're setting out a lot of decoys today. What's your plan for the decoy setup?
We're gonna put them in real tight. It's a heavier wind. We're supposed to get a little bit of rain. So when we run the decoys tighter, the geese are gonna be flying a little lower with that heavy wind. So it'll hopefully suck them in real tight to where we're gonna be sitting.
You've been out here just about every day chasing these geese. You try to get a pattern down on them, but have they been patternable lately?
No, absolutely not. We'll chase them to one field the night before, and we'll set up on them the next morning, and they'll switch it up and go a completely, opposite direction. So
makes your job a lot of fun, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes things tough. But the weather has actually been too nice. We're sitting here mid-November, and it's 60 degrees and rain right now, so it's too warm. So it makes the birds real hard to pattern.
You got geese in the air.
All right, guys, go ahead and kill them.
All right, we're on the board. When Northland Outdoors returns, more conversations with the lake that speaks, and later, a hands-on journey through the history of Minnesota fishing.
Example of the oldest lure that we have on display is this one right here. It's a feathered kidney spoon.
I'm neck deep in a western Minnesota field, not far from the legendary waterfall stopover known as Lac La Parle. On the hunt for Canada geese with guide Tony Crotty and the Watson Hunting Camp. Despite the less than ideal conditions of warm temps, high winds, and rain, our day is off to a solid start. And there are still plenty of geese in the air.
You know, if the birds aren't, or if they're not working in right, if they're not centering up, if they're skirting off to one side or the other, it's one of two things. It's either your hide or it's your decoy set. So out here we got a pretty good hide, being that we're in the pit, we're sitting in the ground, and we've had a couple of different flocks now. They've kind of started to skirt on us a little bit. We've been able to call them back and square them up, but just adjusted some decoys off to the side just to see if we can't get them to get a little closer.
Back in the day, though, when it was huge out here and you had waiting lines to get into the state blinds, you could shoot one goose a day.
Yep, yeah, one goose, and like you say, there was people lined up in ditches and pits and fields and anywhere that they could be, there was people lined up, and they would wait all day to get their one goose.
If there is a historic home of Minnesota goose hunting, Lac La Parle is it. In the 1950s, giant Canada geese were considered extinct, and goose hunting in the state was virtually non-existent. But repopulation efforts in the late 50s and 60s paid off. Goose populations boomed, and hunting here became so popular, the DNR was forced to set up assigned shooting stations around the reservoir. For those that experienced the early days of Lac La Parle goose hunting, the tales are legendary.
You know, my dad grew up here, and he tells me stories about Tennis Shoe Pass. It's just kind of east of the hunting camp here. These guys would line up in their cars, their blue coveralls, and maybe a camouflage jacket, and they'd try and hide in the ditch. The geese would come over, they'd whip out their 10 gauges, and they'd shoot geese. The reason why it's called Tennis Shoe Pass is because whoever could run and get that goose that fell out of the sky first claimed it. So that's why it's called Tennis Shoe Pass.
Watch these geese coming back.
Kill him, guys, kill him. Are you shooting, boys?
All right, all right. Yes, the lake that speaks has been talking to avid waterfowlers for decades and is as outspoken today as ever. A living legacy to effective management, partnering with age-old hunting traditions, and a shining jewel in our Northland outdoors. When we come back, we return to the Minnesota Fishing Museum for a closer look at a colorful angling history. And later, a successful land reclamation story of historic proportions. Downtown Little Falls, Minnesota. Out of the way and unassuming is the Minnesota Fishing Museum, a labor of love for a group of Minnesotans dedicated to preserving the past and creating the definitive history of angling in a state known as the land of 10,000 lakes.
At the Fishing Museum, we say we are preserving the history and heritage of Minnesota fishing. People who collect are also preserving, but they don't have the public access. So we wanted to make sure that in this land of 10,000 lakes, all of us can enjoy learning about and looking at the older ways of fishing. Who said fishermen are not resourceful?
Paint can full of cement.
Yeah, paint can full of cement. That's a valuable artifact, I'm sure. But see, that's the beauty of this place, because it's not about the dollar value, it's about the stories, and it's about, you know, how it was used. And then the oldest sample of an oldest lure we have here is this feathered kidney spoon, and they originated back around 1852. Our founder is Albert. Al is still very much an active part of our museum. He's currently 92 years old. He lives in Sartell. A friend of his, Maury Save, his partner in starting this enterprise, and he got together. They were both retired veterans from World War II. They started going to American Legion clubs and veterans organizations and talking to people about their dream of starting a museum. So the word spread, and soon, piece by piece, thousands, literally thousands of pieces of fishing paraphernalia ended up here all together. And then Al and Maury set about finding a way to display it and creating the Minnesota Fishing Museum.
One thing we haven't talked about yet is ice fishing.
Exactly.
We got a whole room dedicated to ice fishing.
We did. We had a group of folks who put together a wonderful diorama for us here. And in it, it's totally winter. So we have both spearing and angling that are depicted here.
So this is the boat, one of the original boats that was built from memory after the fire.
Exactly, exactly. In 1949, Larson Boat Works burned to the ground. And along with it, the boats that were in progress and the wood shavings and the sawdust and the varnish, also the plans for boat building were burned. So the community and the company and the workers all got back together and said, we want to continue making boats, so what do we need to do? Well, you needed to start with plans. So some people refer to this boat as the memory boat, because in essence, they drew from what they had done, and people on the line added their part. I did this, I did that. I've always wanted us to change this, change that. The designers did their drawings, the people on the line did their input, and together they came out with a boat. We have one of the first 3, I am told. I haven't officially documented that, that came off the line after that fire. It is so stable. One of the old timers is telling me you could literally, in the water with waves, walk from one end of this boat to the other, and you'd never be at all concerned about capsizing. But he also said, you know, because as everyone knows, those old wooden boats were prone to taking on water. So he said you just planned on having wet feet. You just knew you were going to have some
fishing.
wetness. Yeah, it's going to be, and it's going to get wet. Exactly. One of the things we do want to ensure is that the love of fishing carries not only from the past but forward into the future. And so we do actively engage students and young people, and we do a lot of things as activities and events and programs that connect families together. One of the things that happens naturally in here is as people come through and they see a display, and they might see an old lure or an old boat or an old steel rod or whatever it might be, and it'll be, I remember when my dad, my grandpa, my whatever. And all of a sudden they have this young person with them, and they're telling stories about how we used to fish. But now it's like there's a passion, there's a spark, and then with that, they'd take that youngster out to go fishing.
It's all the best of what a proper museum should be, the careful and meticulous preservation of a storied and colorful past. But in the process of sharing what is such a big part of the very fabric of this state, the Minnesota Fishing Museum is not only holding on to the past, but in its own way is helping to ensure the future of fishing in the land of 10,000 lakes. When we come back, a piece of wilderness that was once the center of the Industrial Revolution and the production of iron ore that has been reclaimed and transformed into a living tribute to the majesty of our Northland outdoors. Welcome back to Northland Outdoors and the Minnesota Fishing Museum. Today we've been talking about some of our favorite hunting and fishing adventures that owe a lot to a hunting and fishing past. But we found one of the most beautiful and adventurous places in Minnesota is the way it is because of a past that has nothing to do with hunting or fishing. It's 5,000 acres of some of the most breathtaking woods and water in the upper Midwest. But this particular piece of natural splendor near the Minnesota communities of Crosby and Ironton is so much more. This is a thriving tribute, not only to conservation, but to man and nature's ability to repair, rebuild, reclaim, and reuse a piece of ground that has already given so much.
We had about 70 years of industrial mining here. It started about 1910, 1911. And then once that played out, the mining companies left, and they left an area that looked like a large bunch of gravel pits out there. Nature took over and reclaimed the land there naturally, and then IRRB, which is the Iron Range Resource and Rehabilitation Board, they stepped up and they did some tree planting out there and stuff to help some of the areas look good. And then the community stepped up and said, well, we need to do something more out there. The rec area was established in 1993 by the state legislature, and it was given to the DNR to operate, and then we put together a management plan.
And that management plan went well beyond reclamation and preservation. Instead of a place that was simply pretty to look at, the goal was to create a place where outdoor lovers could get up close and personal with nature and pursue their outdoor passions.
The mountain bike trails, they were built in 2010. The entire summer was the construction year for the mountain bike trails. And then 2011 we opened up for the first time, and we just completed our 5th year of operation. And we're going to be building, for the next several years out, we're going to be building more mountain bike trails. And so it'll be similar, another maybe 4 or 5 miles next year, another couple miles after that. The exact mileage hasn't been set on that yet, but we're looking forward to more mountain bike trails in the near future. It's been very popular. They opened in March of this year, and the occupancy has really grown as the summer went on. So during the months of June, July, and August, on the weekends, we ran at 100% occupancy, and during the week, we were at about 85% occupancy. So it was really, that year program has really caught on. The recreation area has been a real popular spot for fishing for a number of years. We currently stock about 50,000 rainbow and brook trout into about a dozen mine lakes out here. This past year we got into I Can Paddle, which is a DNR program that teaches kids how to paddle. And then a couple of years ago we got into the I Can Mountain Bike, and it's the Cuyuna Lakes Mountain Bike Crew. They run that program there, and they teach people, anybody interested in learning how to mountain bike, they teach them how to mountain bike over a Saturday. So those are 2 real popular programs we've just got into in the last couple of years. I don't think things have leveled off a bit around here. I think there's a lot of momentum locally, and a lot of that is created by the local mountain bike crew. They have a very strong crew, great advocacy for more mountain bike trails, and they support other activities out here as well. And other folks are stepping up, other user groups are stepping up now too and saying it's our turn now too. So we're looking at a lot of different uses out here, developing more uses out here than just, the mountain biking.
In a lot of ways, especially in our love of the outdoors, the past is a big part of the future. Whether it's the preservation of historic history, continuing age-old traditions, or reclaiming a place that had been changed for a time. It could very well be that the good old days are still to come in our Northland outdoors.